She married him to bear his heir. He said to himself, if she wanted to, we could go for a walk and drink champagne while we do it. I don't think she would refuse. At this time, Celine looked at Paras and said to herself, let's come back to our senses. Then she started saying nervously, the reason I envied Mithal. In the end, because I wanted to capture Paras's attention, right? We are already married and we have been apart for 2 days and 1 night. I did everything I could, but now I want to spend more time with him. So she got up and said to herself, I'll be more assertive. Then she said to him, I want you to take me on a tour of the outer castle. And here they looked at each other for a bit. Celine, feeling nervous, said to herself, it's time to make a move. But Paras agreed, smiling at her. Celine blushed in embarrassment, feeling flustered. As Paras offered her his arm, he said, let's go. Celine said, okay, and took his arm. Paras thought to himself, after all, the castle is quite dark and barren. It might not suit her taste. Suddenly, Celine pointed to a building and asked him, what kind of building is this? Paras replied, this place is sometimes used when guests arrive or when a banquet is held. It's empty now. Celine started pulling him along, saying, I see. Paras turned to her and thought to himself, she's skillfully pulling me towards this building. What kind of power does this rabbit-light woman possess? Then, feeling bashful, he closed his eyes, smiled, and said, but I'll let myself be pulled along, even by this small force. It's not bad. Celine continued pulling Paras along, thinking to herself, there's no one in this building, right? All right, then. Thanks to the atmosphere and luck. And here she imagined him kissing her. She continued, saying, maybe we could exchange kisses? Just thinking about it makes me drift off into a reverie. But, as they walked towards the building, Celine thought to herself, let's go there first. A female ghost was behind them. She continued to follow them. When they entered, Celine said, by the way, it's really quiet in here. Suddenly, as she was about to take a step, she heard a sound. She grabbed him tightly and said, didn't you hear something just now? Paras replied calmly, I think I heard Nevis's voice. Celine asked him fearfully, Who is that? Paras said confidently, he's a ghost who lives on the 4th floor of this building. Celine started crying and said, why did you have to talk about him now? Paras asked nervously, what do you mean? Celine replied, the ghost story. But Paras said, it never bothered me before. And I didn't know that anyone in the world could be afraid of ghosts. At this time, the ghost was watching them from afar. And here, when Celine saw it, she screamed from the depths of her being. She pulled him away quickly and said to him, let's get out of here. Come on. Paras replied, okay. Celine continued pulling him along, saying, hurry. At the same time, she thought to herself, thinking about it, it's a world where dragons and magic actually exist. It's impossible that there wouldn't be ghosts. She remembered how scared she was of them as a child and continued to think to herself, I was so scared of ghosts before, but at that time I would tell my mind that it wasn't real. But that's not possible here. Then she looked at Paras and thought to herself, but isn't this too much? They say that humans are the scary ones, but are you so indifferent to this extent he's not even interested in me? I'm really upset. Suddenly, as they were leaving, the gate opened and a carriage entered. Paras looked at her in surprise and thought to himself, who was patrolling outside at this time? Anyway, the people under my command are all useless. And here, the carriage stopped. The Empress, who was Paras's sister, got out of it. She looked at Paras and said, it's been a long time, brother. Paras replied, it has been a while, sister. His sister then said, I heard you got a wife. Celine was looking at them in surprise. Suddenly, Paras stood in front of her and said to his sister, "There's no need to worry about that." His sister fell silent and gave him a stern look. After taking Celine to her room, he hurried to his sister and said, "Why are you here?" And here, his sister said, "I don't need a reason to come home." Paris replied, "I don't think you came all this way without a reason." His sister smiled and said, "I heard the news on the way. Are you looking for a sorceress?" Paris said angrily, "That didn't happen." His sister asked, "Can I help you?" Paris replied, "I don't need your help." His sister said, "You seem to be on good terms with your wife," but Paris told her, "You don't need to care." His sister said, "We are family now, so we have to get used to each other's faces." But Paris told her, "Pretend she's not there and live as you used to." His sister smiled and said, "What if I meet her on the street later and we fight? We should at least know each other's faces so that this doesn't happen." Paris grabbed his throat and said, "Don't even think about playing the same game unless you want to turn the imperial palace into a sea of fire." And here they looked at each other for a bit in silence. Then she sighed and said, "It seems that leaving the battlefield and living far away was worth it, fortunately." As Paris left, he thought to himself, "All witches are like this, arrogant, scheming, and manipulating anything with their fingertips." Then he clenched his fist in anger and continued to think to himself, "It's very annoying that the imperial palace and the ghosts do whatever they want." But he stopped and said, thinking about it, "Is there a witch who is afraid of ghosts? Witches usually treat ghosts like their relatives." So he started thinking and said, "There is more evidence to find the real Celine. Witches who are afraid of ghosts are very rare, and usually when a witch takes a body, the soul of the original body's owner is destroyed or trapped. But such an innocent, weak-hearted witch, it would be impossible for her to do something like that." So he fell silent. Then he smiled and said, "I will make sure to finish this, just in case the original owner of the body cannot return." The next day, Celine woke up happily and said to herself, "Oh, I slept well. Should I wake Paris up? I'll ask him to have breakfast together." But she noticed that Paris was already in the room. Oh my God! And here she hid under the covers. When Paras noticed her, he went to her. Celine was crying and thinking to herself, "Oh, what should I do? Did he see everything? I just woke up and my face was puffy. I yawned really loudly, too. Just imagining it makes me hate it so much. I'm so embarrassed," Paras said to her nervously. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you." Celine looked at him and said, "What brought you here in the morning?" Paras fell silent nervously and thought to himself, "Can I be honest and tell her that there is a dangerous witch, referring to his sister Billis, who is after her now? And that she is a weak-hearted rabbit who is afraid of ghosts even. She might get discouraged when she knows the truth. My sister is different from other witches. This woman will be eaten in one bite without even realizing it. I have contacted the Empire to take the witch away. Until then, I just have to be careful. But what excuse should I give for staying now?" And here Celine was shocked and said to him in fear, "I'm sorry. I was a little surprised." Paris used this lie to stay and said, "I don't want to scare you, but I think you should know. Nevis has disappeared since we were there yesterday. You might like this." He was referring to the ghost. Celine said in shock, "What? Did he go? I love—" "What?" Paris sat down next to her and said, "There's a servant guarding Nevis, but he says he disappeared early in the morning. Nevis often preys on single women and tries to take over their bodies. He succeeded in scaring her, and she covered herself up." Paris asked, "What are you doing?" Celine said, blushing with embarrassment. "Nothing, but I shouldn't be alone, should I?" Paris replied, "Really?" He thought to himself, "Oh my God!" He scared her even more and pointed to the window, saying, "Oh, there's something." He succeeded in this because Celine grabbed his arm and said in fear, "What? What?" Paris looked at her and smiled, thinking to himself, "If I do a good job, I might be able to live with her." But as he tried to scare her further, Methel knocked on the door. Methel entered with breakfast and said, "I'll help you get dressed." Celine rushed to her and said, "Thank goodness, Methel." Paris looked at Methel. He thought to himself, "This was a very enjoyable atmosphere. How can an ignorant maid like this be a duchess's maid? Why is Celine distancing herself, as if she's so happy with this? If it weren't for her being Jart's younger sister, I would have fired her immediately." When Methel noticed Paris's gaze at her, she felt nervous. She remembered her brother Yarrow's words to her when he advised her before working for Celine. "A warning for survival. Listen carefully, sister. If it appears that my master is in a bad mood, stay close to her happiness. It will save your life." And here, Methel said to him, "I will keep that in mind, brother." But when we return to reality, we find Methel frozen with fear. So Celine asked her and said, "What's the matter? Methel, you will wait, right?" And his expression changed completely. And he said, "Of course." Then they looked at each other in embarrassment. So when Methel left, she said to herself, "You were right, brother. Staying by the Duchess's side is my safe haven. I must protect her." The scene changes to Celine, leaving the room with Paras. Suddenly, she started looking at the grass and said to herself, "The place is definitely warmer than it was when I first arrived." Then, with a gentle smile, she said, "It's spring." Paris approaches her and asks, "What's there? Why are you smiling?" Celine replies, "The white butterfly over there. I think it looks just like me. It has to find flowers to get honey, but there are no flowers here. It doesn't have a home to protect it, and no one to care for it. When the wind blows, it will fall, but it will be brave. I thought that for some reason when I saw it flying in search of flowers." Paris looks at her and thinks to himself, "You're making it sound like you're going to leave here soon. That means your stay here with me is temporary." He places his hand on her shoulder and says, "I can do that. A home to protect you, someone to care for you. I can do that.